Hello? Hello? Are you out there? Are you listening? Welcome to the long-awaited, much sought-after Paperback Warrior podcast, episode number 102. I'm your host, Eric, and man, oh man, it's been a long, long time. Listen, I've heard about episode 102 so much that I decided there just has to be a new episode, right? There just has to. I get emails from all over the place. A lot of our social media comments are about the podcast, and it's like, podcast all the time, which is great. I mean, I love to hear that stuff. But if that's not enough, I'm at work, and one of my coworkers named Hector, if you're listening, Hector, I love you. He sends me a Teams chat, and he asks me about the new episode on Spotify. And he sends me this chat. He says, hey, man, why is it just cut off in October of 2022 with episode number 101? Where do I get the rest of the episodes? And I'm like, there aren't any other episodes. But now there are. Now there's more episodes. Trust me. They're right here. More episodes. You can listen to this show and the prior 101 episodes on Amazon Music, Spotify, YouTube, Spreaker, paperbackwarrior.com, and anywhere else that hosts a podcast. We're going to be right there. You can also follow us on Facebook and I want to say Twitter, but X daily. And we're on there almost hourly with post, which is a change, and I'm going to tell you about in a minute. But first, I feel like you probably deserve some kind of explanation here. So Tom and I write a ton of reviews for the blog, and we haven't gone missing. We haven't abandoned Paperback Warrior. We just do a lot of writing, and Tom contributes a review probably once a week, sometimes even more. I crank out 2 book reviews weekly, and then I do that pulpy sort of comic book stuff on Saturdays. So you get new reviews on Paperback Warrior on Mondays, Wednesdays, Fridays, Saturdays. But you want more, right? And I get it. I do too, I guess. So let's take it from the top here and sort of give you an idea for the show going forward. Let's start with Tom. As everyone knows, he retired from the FBI, and he became this walking, talking, real-life version of Spencer for Hire. He's solving crimes all over the country, and as I record this, I understand he's in some town in the middle of Appalachia solving a heist or missing person case or something. I'm going to call it Simon number 14, Appalachia Assault. And Tom's a man of the people, for the people, and he's busy making cash hand over fist. And I say Godspeed to that. A jug of milk and a head of lettuce is $46, so I can totally get it. So he's busy, and I'm pretty convinced that he's going to stay busy. He's just a really successful guy, and I love that. So he's busy, and occasionally, though, I'm going to convince him to send me audio from wherever he's at, and he can kind of fill us in on his shopping, what he's reading, and heck, if you have a crime that needs to be solved, go out there and Google Tom Simon Worldwide Investigations. That dude is all over the internet. He's doing interviews and talking about his business and all these crazy cases that he's experienced in his career. It's just wild stuff. The bottom line is making time for him to drive 40 minutes to my house when he's already all over the country half the month it's just not working. Plus, I work 7 days a week. I'm a slave to bills. I have 2 girls. I'll talk about them in a second, but they've got college coming up, and I just work all the time. However, the last maybe 5-6 episodes that appear on the show, Tom would send me a recording from some dive that he's sleeping in somewhere in the country to tell us about his recent shopping trip and some of the stores that he's hit and so forth. So he'll be on in a bit to sort of fill us in on his recent shopping experience. In the meantime, I'm your guy. I'm your solo host. And I hope you'll welcome me into your home, your car, your gym, your ear hole. That sounds really gross. But for me, I'm still working as an insurance agent. I've been with Blue Cross Blue Shield 16 years now. And I'm going to do a little shameful plug here. I don't mind. I mean, I really don't. I do Medicare products. So if you're on Medicare and you live in any of these states, I'm your guy. New York, Maine, New Hampshire, Connecticut, Virginia, Georgia, Kentucky, Ohio, Wisconsin, Indiana, Missouri, but not the Kansas City area, and California and Nevada. I feel like one of those pageant hosts that's like naming out all the Miss America things. Also, I do Medicare plans for Tennessee and Florida. So if you need me on like the business side of things, you can hit me up at christopher.compton@anthem.com. I'm not plugging any specific plan or details about plans, so I don't get in any trouble. But my first name there, as you can see, is Christopher, so I'm like a secret agent. Everyone in the know calls me Eric, but at work, they literally have no idea an Eric even exists. So I'm Christopher at work to like everyone. But on a personal note, as I touched on earlier, my oldest daughter has graduated high school. She's in that weird 18-year-old mindset of trying to figure out like what she wants to do in life. She got accepted at University of Arizona, but that's nuts. It's crazy expensive. My vote is to become an insurance agent or a private eye. Who knows? My other daughter graduates high school this upcoming year. Plans to attend Full Sail University if I can get like a fourth mortgage on the house. But yeah, seriously, why is college so expensive? It's insane. Hopefully, if things pan out, she will be shooting like Star Wars media for Disney, and she can afford to put me like in a really nice nursing home in like 20 years or something. On a somber note, getting close to 50 years old now, the cycle of life rears its ugly head like more and more. Friends and family are passing away. I'm almost convinced, like when you're age 45 to 65, that 20-year span is watching your loved ones and friends and things just pass away. My wife, Sarah, she got hit really hard last year with the death of her father. And just over the past weekend, her uncle passed away. I lost my uncle just a few weeks ago. And cancer, I hate you. Like, I really, really hate you. But you just keep getting through it because that's all you can do. A lot of motivation comes from writing reviews or even recording shows. And it sort of deflates all that stuff, and you can kind of escape for just a little while. I don't talk about the real world very much on the show. Tom never did either because we don't want to be in the real world that much. The real world kind of sucks sometimes, but we sort of escape, with our family and close, friends and books. So it's really nice. And I read all these awesome comments about books or posts on the social media groups and the Facebook groups that we're part of. It's really an escape, and it's healing in a way, and it's awesome, and I really, really like it, and just keep on bringing that. So what's up with Paperback Warrior? So starting about, I guess, maybe a year ago, we introduced more genres. So now we're getting pretty much everything written. Any kind of written genre is basically being reviewed at this point. I mean, we're not doing like, Randall McNally. Does they even make Rand McNally? Is that what it was? Rand McNally? Do they even make Rand McNally maps anymore? I remember back in the day, you would go to like State Farm, and if that was your insurance, they had Rand McNally maps. Like you just get them for free, and they had like obviously the maps and everything in there, but they had like information about some of the states, which was really cool. Anyway, we're not reviewing those, but we're reviewing just about everything else. We started out concentrating on men's action adventure books like The Executioner, for example, and crime fiction by people like Harry Whittington and Gil Brewer. As time went on, though, we started incorporating reviews of other genres: horror, science fiction, post-apocalyptic, sword and sorcery, westerns, the pulps, crime fiction, the golden age of mystery, some of those golden age, detective pulps and books and things like that, military fiction, magazines, comic books, graphic novels. That's the other thing. I guess they call comic books graphic novels now, I guess. But I mean, I don't hear anyone saying, hey, I'm going to go down to the graphic novel store. I don't hear that anymore. I still hear that people say they're going to the comic book store. But back in the day, comic books were monthly, weekly, or bi-weekly. And graphic novels were the bigger books that were basically just, one-shots. Like, I don't know, I think I recently just picked up Punisher, The Big Easy, something like that. Now the kids just say graphic novels for everything. But these comics are only the ones that sort of fit in with what we do here. So I'm reviewing, I might review like a Tarzan comic book or a Doc Savage comic book. Or really, I've been reading here lately a lot of the old black and white stuff from Warren and Marvel. So I'm trying to stay in the wheelhouse of what we do here. I'm not trying to drift off into like Spider-Man or Silver Surfer. I'm not doing any of that stuff. We also have a lot of Robert E. Howard posts on Saturdays. I hope you guys are enjoying this. I've been spending a lot of time reading Robert E. Howard, and I've been posting Conan and Solomon Kane and some of his shorts, horror-related, sword and sorcery kind of stuff on Saturdays. Anyhow, the point is we cover just about everything these days, but the comic stuff and pulp magazines are typically just going to be on Saturdays. Every year, we dedicate the month of October to horror, and that's going to be the same case this year. A whole month of October of horror books, comics, pulps, like the scary stuff. Looking at the calendar, let's see how many reviews that is. So the calendar this year, that's going to amount to 17 reviews coming in October of scary stuff. Or at least something that sort of crosses into horror, like, I don't know, Dr. Death or something like that, sort of on the fringe of horror. On our Facebook and X pages, I've committed to doing something a little more engaging there. For years and years, we would post new reviews 4 days a week. These new reviews will simply say at the beginning now, new review. That way you'll know that it's a new review. Because we also post archive reviews, digging into the thousands of reviews in our blog archive, which you can get to by clicking the right side link. There's links on the right-hand side for like Nautical or Fawcett Gold Medal or Ace Double, for example. By the way, I've updated the tags. So if you go there and look, you'll see like different tags now. Like I mentioned, Fawcett Gold Medal has its own tag. The Ace Doubles have their own tag. Nautical has a tag. There's a few other tags that I came up with to sort of separate things out a little bit more. But you can go to paperbackwarrior.com on your mobile device, scroll down to the bottom, and click on View Desktop Version. And I really prefer that you read Paperback Warrior that way, because then you get the whole shebang. The tags, the reviews, the podcast archives there. The storage space to house all of this writing and book covers and tons of stuff. It's dedicated to making the site and the podcast look as good as possible. So that's sort of the design, is the whole thing there, and you can only see it if you go to the desktop version. The mobile's fine, and I read mobile stuff all the time with blogs and things that I follow, but I like the desktop version better. It's a little more groovy. But aside from just posting reviews on social media, we also run advertisements for books or magazines with a link to our Amazon affiliate page. This helps us make a few bucks each month to pay for our domain, massive Dropbox storage space to house like book covers and all the stuff that goes into writing the reviews, because some of those images are fairly large. And the cost of our hosting company, as I mentioned earlier. You can also donate on the desktop version with a link near the top right. Shout out to our donors who honestly keep giving every month, which helps out tremendously. Even though the podcast hasn't necessarily been on, we still have donors that give money every month. So I really, really, really appreciate Bob Dice, James Seeger, David Kowalski, KR Training, Ida Umfers. We've gotten donations, multiple donations from some of those folks every single month. I'd also want to do a shout out to a gentleman named Michael Casada, who just recently gave a very generous donation to us to help with some of the cost. So I really appreciate that. We also have a lot of people that reach out to us, fans of the show, fans of the blog, just to tell us about their purchases and things that they've found. So I'm going to give a shout out to our friend Grant. He sends emails about things that he finds in the wild. He's in Grant. You're gonna kill me. I think you're in Australia. I always get Australia and New Zealand a little confused, so I apologize. But I think Grant's in Australia. But he finds some really cool stuff there, and he sends us emails. And while I don't get a chance to reply to all of them, they always get read, and I find them really interesting. And sometimes I'll post them on Facebook with pictures and ask if anybody's read these books. But so hey, Grant, and again, thanks for sending Tom and I your finds, and everybody. I appreciate everything. Like I said, the comments, the donations, everything's been awesome. The support's been great. But back to the social media and some of the changes I'm going to make. So I've been Here recently, I've been trying to post about 5 to 7 times per day on X and Facebook. And these posts are going to be more informational with the idea of getting discussion going. These posts will celebrate things like author birthdays, old book releases from the 20th century, cool little did you know posts about obscure authors and pulp magazines, maybe some mysteries about the literature, as a whole. There's also posts about publishers, pulp characters, artists, some comic book stuff. I want to make sure that we give you a reason to hop on and check us out like a few times per day, because you're always going to find something on there. Every hour, every few hours, there's going to be something new. And sometimes I'll spread it out to some of the Facebook groups, but I don't want to just bog them down, every 2 hours with our stuff. So you may not see our stuff in the Facebook group chats that you're all part of, but just go to our, direct profile and you'll see all the stuff. Because we like to have discussions about books and talk about books because, hey, we love you. So I'm going to be posting some pretty snazzy book and pulp covers on there. So, it's going to be like eye candy galore. With all that being said, let me tell you about the podcast format and at least how I'm thinking things will go with the podcast going forward. First off, as you noticed, the cover art for the episodes probably like a little more streamlined. In years past, I'm not joking, I would spend a week just doing the dang cover art for the episode. And I mean, I think some of the later episodes, like episode 60 forward, had pretty decent artwork because I spent a lot of time on it. But it's time consuming, and I'd rather just get episodes written, recorded, and give you stuff to listen to instead of just staring at a little tiny cover of an episode. So forgive me if the covers aren't, spectacular. I'm just trying to get things done and get stuff on the air. If anyone out there wants to make covers for me, hey, feel free to email me if you want to make covers and, they look good. And if you want like free publicity, hey, send me an email, ab87063@gmail.com. Again, A like apple, B like boy, 87063@gmail.com. Make up a Paperback Warrior podcast episode thing and send it to me and we can look at it. But otherwise, it's just going to be plain Jane for the covers. On the show, we would traditionally do an intro, then a short spill on new books that are out, some shopping and buying, that sort of thing. And we're still going to do that. But instead of like one long 15-minute feature, I may just do like more mini features. I mean, I'm still going to have episodes that are going to have longer features, depending on the subject, but possibly going to do just more mini features, which is what this episode is going to be consisting of. Maybe 1 or 2 features on book publishers, authors, pulp magazines, something that's related to what we do here. And so similar to what I've been doing in the past, I'm going to put a book review up as well. But here's the new thing. This is kind of a new thing. So listen, it's kind of odd, but I've had a few requests from fans, and even folks at work have asked me this. They've asked if we wanted to like consider reading stories on the show. Like I hop on and read you a story from an old anthology or a pulp magazine or a digest or something that I find online. I want to make sure that we're clear on this. These are vintage stories from the 20th century. I'm not interested in reading, a short story someone posted on Reddit or put in some new quarterly magazine featuring new authors. Other podcasts can do that, which is great. I just want to find like short stories and just read them to the best of my ability in a fun, audible styled way, I guess. Think of it as an audiobook. So to introduce those stories, I'll touch a little bit on the author, the publication, and if there was any like interesting history behind the story, author, or publication. I mean, I think it'll be fun. But if that's not really your jam, if you don't really want to listen to me just read a story, I'm going to put the story on at the end. So I'll do the traditional podcast episode, and then at the end, I'll put in the story. I'll sort of do a little segue there into the story. That way, if you just want to hop off, duck out at that point, and then just wait on the next episode, that's perfectly fine. it's not going to be everybody's jam to listen to me just read a story, but some people really seem to really like it. And there's a ton of stories out there in the archives that are just buried that, might be fun to read together. So I think it'll be kind of cool. So I hope you like all these changes. And, I don't mind telling you that Paperback Warrior really does play like a huge part of my life. I mean, I pick out books to read based on what I think people want to hear about, that want to read about reviews, read reviews about the books that we're picking out. I spend 3 to 4 hours each day designing posts and scheduling them, during my regular gig here at work. I'll surf through, archive.org like a madman, just scavenging old books and magazines. I thumb through my own collection, just trying to find material to write reviews, do Paperback Warrior episodes, and also to post on our social media. So I spend a lot of time doing it, and it means a lot when you guys just show up to drop a comment, or look forward to the next episode or something. So it's awesome. So it's definitely rewarding to do all the work. But back to our regularly scheduled programming, which is today's episode. So here's what we're going to be pouring from the tap today. First, I've got new book acquisitions. I've got to tell you about those, right? Tom is also going to come on and tell us about his recent shopping trip. And I've got 2 features today. The first one is on a cool vintage book publisher from the mid-20th century. You're going to like this. I'll dig into the history of the publisher, what books they published, some of the who's who of authors they lined up, and so forth. The second feature is on an author from the early 20th century named William L. Chester. Some of you may know his name from Dahl Books back in the 70s, but his work was way, way before the 70s. So I'm going to tell you about him. And then I have a review for a 1971 suspenseful mystery called Crawl Space by a guy named Herbert Lieberman. Like, seriously, this book is creepy. And I can't wait to talk about it. So let me reach over here and grab these books, wherever they went. Where did my books go? While I'm reaching here, that kind of throws a pain at my arm here. So on a personal note, I'm going to be getting rotator cuff surgery later this year. I got an MRI scheduled this week. So I managed to shred my shoulder lifting dumbbells like a complete jackass at the gym. Like, I was in really good shape for about a year. And I even took my shirt off at the pool last summer, which was a big deal. And then I hurt my left shoulder at the gym and went on the shelf with something called frozen shoulder, which I had no idea that was an actual thing. So I had frozen shoulder, and then I had to go get physical therapy for my left shoulder. And just as it got healed and I was back at the gym, bam, I just shredded my right shoulder. Like, seriously, destroyed my right shoulder. So I'm going to have to go, completely iPad, I guess, when my arm's in a sling and I can't hold a book. I'm just going to one arm an iPad and just use my thumb to, I don't know. We'll figure it out. All right, I got some new books. I'm going to tell you that I receive a ton of books. Lately, I've gotten a ton of books, but bear with me because as I go through these, honestly, I'm just now pulling some of these out of the packaging. So, let me see here. First up is a book called The 17th Letter by an author named Dorothy Cameron Disney. Disney, like it sounds like Disney. This is being published by Starkhouse Press in September, I think. This book was originally published in hardcover in 1945. The magazine version was published in Saturday Evening Post between 1944 and 1945. Then Bantam got a hold of it and released it as a paperback 2 years later. But the artwork fiends out there are going to be really happy to know that Starkhouse retained the original artwork from the 1947 Bantam paperback. So I know that'll make you happy. The review on the back of the book from Kirkus Review says that The 17th Letter is a mad tale of spies, counter-espionage, in which Paul and Mary undertake a job that proves a bit out of their depth. They play straight into the hands of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, who are working on the same case and they lead them inadvertently to forestalling a large-scale prison break, a planned theft on a wholesale scale, and the bombing of a Halifax harbor. Sounds pretty good. The author, Dorothy Cameron Disney, she authored 9 crime novels between 1936 and 1949. So again, the 17th letter by Starkhouse Press comes out in September, I think. So you got that. Next one is also from Starkhouse Press, but it's their imprint, Black Gat Books. This book is Hunter at Large by Thomas Dewey. This comes out in September, and once again, the publisher retained the artwork from the original paperback printing from Perma Books back in 1963. And I've had an original copy of this paperback for a long time, and I really like Thomas Dewey. But for one reason or another, I just never read this book. But listen to the synopsis of this book. I mean, I don't know why I never read this. Listen to this thing. They had killed his Kathy. The 2 men knocked on the door, asked for Mickey Phillips, then sapped him. When he woke up, they had him tied up, forced to watch as they brutally murdered her in front of him. Straining the ropes, he finally dislocated both of his arms, and he passed out from the pain. To be sure there were no witnesses, they shot him and left him for dead. The next time he awoke, Mickey was in a hospital bed. This time the pain was almost more than he could bear. They had killed his Kathy, but he would never recover. And he would find them, and they would pay for what they had done. Man, this sounds like I don't know, like a gritty revenge tale, and I'm really excited to read this. And we covered, I was thinking about this, we covered Thomas Dewey's life and career on episode 50 of this podcast. And there's also a primer about the author on our blog. So again, you can go on the right-hand side. There's tags to scroll down to Thomas Dewey. There's links there of his reviews of his books, I should say, and the primer's right there. And the podcast episode is there as well. But again, this is Hunter at Large by Thomas Dewey on Black Gat Books, coming out this September, so you'll want to get that. I had bought an older collection off of Amazon called The White Savage, The Complete Tales of Matalaa. I think I'm saying that right. It's Matalaa. Matalaa or Matalala, I don't know. It's an Altus Press release, which is really Steger Books now, and the author is Lee Hoffman Price, writing under the pseudonym of Martin McCall. And here's the back of the book. It says, The Jungle Lord of the South Pacific? Thrill to the adventures of Warren Still Jr., the only survivor of a South Seas shipwreck who was raised by a witch doctor to battle evil. Written by pulp master E. Hoffman Price, this series has never been properly reprinted until now. The introduction is by Will Murray, and he explains the book's contents. And the book has got 4 novels of The White Savage that appeared in Red Star Adventures magazine from 1940 to 1941. So at some point I'm going to read this, and I even started it recently, but I just drifted on to something else, and I just never came back to it. I think I got 20 pages into it. It was fine. It was good. I just, for whatever reason, just ended up moving on to something else. We've all done that, right? So those were my purchases, but I did want to tell you about another one. Recently, I did receive a book from Ben Guest. Ben Guest, he's a big supporter of the blog, and he's bought a lot of my paperbacks out of my library. So Ben Guest loaned me a book called The Magic Wagon by Joe R. Lansdale. Synopsis, let me get to that. It's a July 1988 Bantam paperback. Looks terrific, but on the back here it says, when the Magic Wagon comes to town, folks get a genuine medicine show that includes a wrestling ape, fancy shooting, and a peek at the petrified body of Wild Bill Hickok himself. They also get bottles of a whiskey-laced elixir to drown their aches and pains. Old Albert drives the wagon. A raw-boned youngster named Buster Fogg does the odd jobs, and champion trick shooter and fast talker Billy Bob Daniels owns the show. So onward, the magic wagon rolls until it arrives in Mud Creek, a godforsaken East Texas town where the dark cloud of fate hovers and violence looks in the shadows. This one looks like it may even have like a horror tone to it or a dark fantasy feel, but it's definitely a Western, and it looks great. I'm going to read this. It's a really short paperback, so I'm definitely going to read this, and I'll do a review as well. But a couple things on your radar that you might want to look for. Here's one I wanted to mention is Zorro, Swordplay and Romance. It's brand new, published by the good folks at Bold Venture Press. This is an anthology featuring 15 all-new Zorro short stories. You can get it at boldventurepress.com. Bold Venture Press has been doing a lot of Zorro stuff, so if you're into Zorro, that's the place to be. Also, Wolfpack Publishing has 2 books out that look really interesting. These 2 books are the first installments of a brand new adult Western series called Kid Crimson. I mean, again, a brand new adult Western series. How many times have we said that in the past 20 years? Like, never. The first 2 books are Gunpowder Mountain and The Guns of Goblin Valley. What a title. The blurb is, step into the 1860s Wild West with Gunpowder Mountain, the thrilling first installments of the new Kid Crimson adult Western series. And you can check out these books at wolfpackpublishing.com. You can buy both of them off of Amazon. They look great. If you end up reading them before I do, let me know how they are. I'm kind of curious on those. And I mentioned earlier that I do have Tom's recording that he sent me of his recent book shopping experience. And he's somewhere in the U.S. I don't know where, but I'll let him tell you about it. Here you go. Here's Tom.
Hello, Eric and Paperback Warrior fans. This is Tom Simon, and I am so sorry I was unable to join Eric in the studio this week, but he was kind enough to give me a segment on the show that I'm going to use to recommend a used bookstore that I visited a couple weeks ago. So I recently found myself in Maryland hiking some segments of the Appalachian Trail, and I was between the town of Frederick and the town of Hagerstown, and I saw that both of these small cities had branches of a bookstore called Wonder Books that I was able to visit. Now, if the name Wonder Books rings a bell, it's probably because they do a robust online business fulfilling used paperback orders through Amazon and eBay. I know I've had good luck with them in the past via the mail, so I wanted to see what their brick and mortar operations were like. I went to the Frederick store first, and it was amazing. It's in a modest strip mall, and outside the place there are rows and rows of shelves with poorly organized paperbacks for $1 a piece. The vast majority of these were Westerns, and I picked up some titles by Giles Lutz, and Frank Gruber. I also got a short story collection called Iron Men and Silver Stars, edited by Donald Hamilton. He's the author of the Matt Helm Spy series. The collection includes short stories by Hamilton, as well as Luke Short, Brian Garfield, and others. I'm really looking forward to reading and reviewing this one, even though book reviews of short story collections are kind of pointless. Again, the book is called Iron Men and Silver Stars, edited by Donald Hamilton. There was also boxes of Mac Bolan books in pristine condition sitting outside the store. I found a bunch of Bolan novels written by Chet Cunningham because I always liked his writing. They included The Executioner 69, Skysweeper, number 72, Hellbinder, and 88, Baltimore Trackdown, and they ranged in years between 84 and 86. Beautiful covers, great condition, and they were $1 a pop, so what are you going to do? There was also a box of John D. MacDonald books, both Travis McGee and standalones. My 20-year-old son is a water polo player at Florida State University and majoring in biology, and he's discovered vintage paperbacks this summer and has been raiding my collection for reading material. He's working his way through the Evan Tanner books by Lawrence Block, beginning with The Thief Who Couldn't Sleep, and he just read his first John D. MacDonald Travis McGee book, The Deep Blue Goodbye from 1964, and he really loved that. So I was happy to spend $1 a piece on a bunch of Travis McGee novels. As you know, they're color-coded, so I got him gray, copper, tan, amber, scarlet, and red, which should keep him out of the college bars this semester, hopefully. Inside the store, bookstore was pretty amazing as well. The mystery section went on forever and included a lot of spy and action novels as well. There were so many vintage paperbacks in this place. The stuff inside the store were $4 per paperback, which is still a pretty good price. I bought a historical epic called The Shadow Warriors by Cameron Judd about the onset of the Civil War from the perspective of a bunch of characters in eastern Tennessee, which is also where Mr. Judd is from. The book was written in 1997 and takes place in the years between 1860 and 1863. Cameron Judd's a pretty accomplished Western author who's very highly respected in the genre. And after I got home, I saw that the book that I bought was the first in a trilogy that has been reprinted by our friends at Wolfpack Press, probably the best men's adventure publisher going today. And again, the book is called The Shadow Warriors by Cameron Judd. The Hagerstown Wonder Bookstore also was great, but not as good as the Frederick one, but it's still pretty awesome. Both stores were huge with great selections of reasonably priced vintage paperbacks. I picked up a bunch of historical fiction adventure books by a British author named Christopher Nicole. I remember liking a spy novel he wrote called Operation Destruct from 1969, and I wanted to read more by him. He's an interesting fellow who was born in 1930, and I can't find any record of his death. He was born in the Caribbean British colony of Guyana and lived in his adult life in the Channel Islands, kind of nestled between England and France. I'm currently reading a paperback as I'm speaking by him that I bought at Wonder Books called Haggard. It's basically a plantation slave melodrama adventure, but the interesting thing is that it takes place in Barbados, a Caribbean island that was sort of a plantation island. It takes place in, I think, 1780. It's too early to know if the book is a masterpiece because I'm only on chapter 1, but it has really grabbed me thus far. Again, the book is called Haggard by Christopher Nicole, and it's still available on Kindle Unlimited, if that's your thing. Overall, I'd say if you were driving through Western Maryland, I would definitely recommend visiting Wonder Books. You're going to walk away with a ton of old paperbacks. I think it's probably the third best used bookstore I've ever been to in America, and I think I've been to damn near all of them. Number one, I think, is Chamblin's Books in Jacksonville. We're just lucky to have that here. The second best bookstore I've ever been to is John King Books in Detroit. But I think Wonder Books, if you take them collectively, has to be number 3. But please let me know if you disagree. Anyway, Paperback Warrior fans, that was my report from the field. Hey, if you are on TikTok or Instagram, I post daily 90-second true crime stories to hype my private investigative firm. The online handle is Simon Investigations, and you'll see my paperback library prominently featured in the background of most of the videos if you look closely. That's it for me. Thank you for listening. Have a great day and be cool.
All right, so thanks, Tom, for that, and I wanted to move on and get us a couple of I can't say that. I wanted to get us a couple of miniature features here. So let me push this little button here and get us in the mood with this moody tune that you all love. All right, so first off is a handy feature. Keyword handy. I'm talking about Handy Books, a publisher that produced nearly 150 paperbacks between 1941 and 1959. Now that's spelled H like Henry, A like Apple, N like Nancy, D like David, I like Igloo. So not traditional spelling of handy, I guess it's handy with an I. To kick it off, let's go back in time to 1909. It was this year that James Lewis Quinn was born in Alabama. He would later form the Quinn Publishing Company, which was located in New York City. The company's claim to fame was that science fiction magazine called IF, which launched in March of 1952. That magazine ran through February of 1959 before being sold to Galaxy Science Fiction, who then ran it, I think, through 1974, 75. But along with the IF publication, the Quinn Publishing Company also ran a paperback line. This is how Handy Books began publishing, which was back in 1941. So Quinn Publishing Company starts by creating Handy Books publisher. So the odd thing about Handy Books is their early publications, their early books had staples. The binding was stapled instead of glued. So it's kind of odd, but this was because they were larger than the typical mass market paperback. but they were smaller than digest. So the initial size was 11.5 centimeters by 16 centimeters, which, if you'll recall, is the same as like the early Avon books, but slightly wider than, say, pocketbooks. So by the time the publisher reached number 34, their 34th book, which was 1945, they then moved into the more traditional, square spine. The numbering system, you talk about numbers, the numbering system was mostly cohesive. The first 8 books were unnumbered. Beginning with number 9, they printed the book number on the inside. And then beginning with number 10, the publisher would advertise the next upcoming book on the back of the book. With number 36, the book numbers became printed on the spines. In 1949, the publisher began to speed up production by releasing 2 books per month, and they continued that pace up until 1951. In 1946, they got a little ambitious, and they decided they were going to try to do another line called Handy Westerns, but it was a failure. It only lasted 4 books. And from what I gather, this address for Handy Westerns doesn't match the New York City address of the publisher. This one was headquartered in Kingston, New York, a separate location, which I think probably is where James Quinn actually lived, I think. But the first few books of this line of handy books, first few books are called Odds on the Hot Seat by Judson Phillips, 1941. Decoy by Cleve Adams, 1942. This next one I'm even hesitant to say, but just forgive me for saying the title of this book. I mean, it was a different era. It was different back then. It's extremely racist now, but it's just the way things were back then. We've moved past this and became a better people, but the name of the next book is 12 Chinks and a Woman by James Hadley Chase, 1942. 7 Men by Theodore Roscoe. Curtains for the Copper by Thomas Polsky. That was 1942 as well. Bullet in His Cap by Robert Fleming. That was also 1942. I mean, that's the first 6 handy books paperbacks. But let me highlight for you some of the amazing writers and books that later were coming out on handy books. So just to give you an idea, Lazarus by Richard Sale, Black Alibi by Cornell Woolrich, The Case of the Walking Corpse by Davis Dresser, using the name Brett Halliday of Mike Shane fame, I Wake Up Screaming by Steve Fisher, Up Jumped the Devil by Cleve Adams, No Good from a Corpse by Lee Brackett, Dead Little Rich Girl by Norbert Davis, Death About Face by Frank Kane, Hope to Die by Hilary Wall. We're going to be talking about Hilary Wall maybe in the next episode. Love to Burn by Peggy Gaddis. I mean, the names just keep on going. I mean, I'm looking down the list. Robert O. Saber, which was really Milton Ozaki. You've got Norman A. Fox, Robert Leslie Bellum, Edward S. Aarons, Harry Whittington, which on Harry Whittington, they published 3 of Harry Whittington's novels. Sleigh Ride for a Lady, The Lady Was a Tramp, and The Brass Monkey. And they could have published more of his stuff maybe, and I just don't recognize the pseudonym. I don't know, but I know 3 of those books were, obviously the 3 Harry Whittingtons exist. Handy books mostly concentrated their 139 books on crime fiction, but they would put in some other types of genres. So they put in westerns and I think 3 science fiction novels. Let me look here. I made a little stat sheet here. So 139 different titles, 97 were mystery crime fiction, roughly 18 were science fiction books, 35 were westerns, and then there were a couple romance novels sprinkled in and reprints of earlier editions that sort of made it in as well. There were at least 7 handy book publications that were originally published in magazine format. So 7 of these books were originally found in magazines. In terms of cover art, as the publisher grew, they were able to hire some really great artists. Guys like Norman Saunders, Victor Olson, Mike Privatello, and also, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, James Quinn himself did some artwork as well. So they were doing, obviously Handy Books was doing well. They had some great authors. They had a great lineup. The artwork was looking great. But for whatever reason, by 1951, they folded due to poor sales, I guess. Probably had some stiff competition at that point. So they ended up going out of business. Handy Books, folded. But as for their parent, Quinn Publishing, as I mentioned earlier, Quinn Publishing ended up moving on to If Magazine. In 1957 and 1958, 2 books emerged from Quinn that collected stories that were originally in the If Magazine. Those 2 books were called The First World of If and then The Second World of If. By the 1970s, this publisher had moved on to crossword puzzle books for God's sake, but that's where they had gone from 1941 to the 1970s. They'd gone from being a paperback publisher, doing a really respected science fiction magazine, and then just to see where they ended up at was kind of depressing, I guess. But James Quinn, he died in Kingston, New York in 1992. So there you have it, my little mini feature on Handy Books. And I learned quite a bit in researching this publisher. How many of you out there have Handy Books? If you do have some Handy Books, on this episode, post on the on Facebook or X, show me what you got. Show me some Handy Books that you've got in your collection. I bet you have some cool covers. My sources for this feature was the excellent 15-page PDF that was authored by Kenneth Johnson and found on bookscans.com. And also used John Warren's Paperbacks Official Price Guide, first edition from 1991. Okay, so I promised you guys another short feature. So how about I do another short feature before I break out my review of Crawl Space. All right, so let's head back. We're going all the way back to 1907 in New York City. The married couple William Chester of Minnesota and Christina Jensen of Denmark give birth to William L. Chester. By 1930, Chester is working as a clerk at a bank, and he's married to Irene Lang, and I don't think they had any kids. By 1940, Chester changes his career to a skating instructor, which really helped him because during World War II, he served with the ski troops at Camp Hell, Colorado. He then became a real estate agent and worked as an admin assistant at the Westchester Medical Center in New York. So you're probably asking, what's the point of all this, right? I'm asking that question too. It turns out William L. Chester was a part-time author. He wrote a series of novels, or really serials, that spawned a 3.5-hour film, which also kind of morphed into an edited television movie. And I've got the scoop for you, so let's talk about it. So Chester's first publication appeared in Blue Book magazine in April 1935. It was the first of a 7-part serial called Hawk of the Wilderness, and that ran from April through October 1935. This serial was the debut of a character called Kyoga. Again, I'm not sure about the name. It's K like King, I like Igloo, O like Oscar, G like Girl, A like Apple. So Kyoga, I'll say Kyoga. This character was inspired by Tarzan and features a warrior, Kyoga, living among Native American tribes, but in a lost land in the Arctic. The serial was then placed into a hardcore. What am I talking about? Wrestling. The serial was then placed into a hardcover novel by Harper and Brothers, and then published in 1936. This serial and book was extremely popular, so popular that Republic Pictures was a big deal back then. Republic Pictures bought the rights and launched a 12-part serial titled Hawk of the Wilderness, starring Herman Brix, and this was in 1938. Coincidentally, Brix had played as Tarzan in a serial called The New Adventures of Tarzan back in 1935, so he's like perfect for the role, right? Later, a TV version of the same name was released with the title Lost Island of Kyoga. The book was even reprinted by Grosset and Dunlop to tie in with the movie. At the same time, Ace Books gets into the show, and they issue a paperback of the original hardcover, but as a mass-market paperback under the original name of Hawk of the Wilderness. What a messy publication. But anyway, are you still with me so far? Because we're not done with old Kyoga. William L. Chester goes back to the well again, and he pens a sequel serial called Kyoga of the Wilderness. And it ran from April to October 1936 in Blue Book, which was Blue Book, which was the one that it was originally in. Dahl Books, legendary sci-fi publisher, fantasy publisher, Dahl Books published this serial in paperback format in 1976. Then another serial starring the character was written as One Against the Wilderness. And again, that appeared in Blue Book magazine from March through August 1937. Dahl Books published this serial in paperback in 1977. Note that with this book, it's a collection of linked short stories starring the main character, Kyoga. Then another serial appeared in Blue Book from March through August 1938 called Kyoga of the Unknown Land. As you can imagine, this was also published as a paperback by Dahl in 1978. So that's it for Kyoga, but there's still a little bit more on William L. Chester. So he also had one other story published, and it was called Not to the Swift, and it was included in the October 1938 issue of Adventure. But I want to get you, let me pull it up here. Bear with me for just a moment. I've got something else I want to share with you on William L. Chester. As I was kind of rooting around and finding things about this author and about Kyoga, I discovered that he wrote a letter that was published in the December 3rd, 1936 edition of the New York Times. And it's a letter that he wrote under the title In Defense of the Pulps. So, In Defense of the Pulps. And it's a really cool letter. And in a way, it kind of describes everything that we do here at Paperback Warrior and that we hold kind of, as a high regard in terms of literature. And I can't tell you how many people ask me, like, what I'm reading. And I'll tell them, I'm reading, whatever it is, some kind of vintage paperback, and they sort of scoff at it, and they they demand to know why I'm not reading James Patterson or Colleen Hoover or something like that. And people sometimes criticize the books that we read because we're kind of weird. We read some a lot of different things. We don't just read the flavor of the month. So a lot of people don't like genre fiction. They don't like that. In fact, in my interview with I can't even think of his name now. What am I thinking? Ralph Hayes. Interviewed Ralph Hayes, and he had came to the defense of genre fiction, and he pointed out that a lot of fantastic, critically acclaimed authors wrote genre fiction. So anyway, Chester apparently found some fault with the previous article that someone had written. I can't remember the name of the writer, but someone had written a sort of a column in the New York Times criticizing the pulp magazines and what kind of influence they have on the readers. So let me read you what I've got here. So I'm going to read you this letter, and it's a short letter. Just bear with me. It's a short letter, but I think you'll like it. I wish I could read it in Tom's old man voice. Remember Tom when he would do the old man voice? I can't do that, so I'm not even going to bother to try, but I'm going to read this to you. It says, To the editor of the New York Times. In the New York Times of November 29th, Miss Anita P. Forbes is quoted as stating that the material found in pulp magazines constitutes a menace to high school pupils' morals, English, and minds. Many will recognize the particular class of pulp magazine to which Miss Forbes refers and agree with her conclusions. But I wish that for accuracy's sake, she had used a more correct term like certain pulp magazines, so as not erroneously to condemn those which are offering good and often excellent fiction. I would further call her attention to the fact that stories from pulp magazines have found places, and frequently in collections published from year to year as representative of the best. Moreover, magazines not designated as pulps are not always found immaculate in the matter of printing material which might be called objectionable. How is it fair arbitrarily to condemn thrills in stories? Treasure Island, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and The Three Musketeers all provided thrills, helped while away idle hours, and required no profound mental effort from the reader. Indeed, ease of reading is one of the goals of many writers, involving considerable art and great pains in composition. Simply because a story is easily grasped and does not weary the brain, it does not follow that it must be demoralizing. It is also worth remembering that the pulp magazines, so sweepingly condemned, have been the training ground for authors famous for the literary caliber of their work, not to mention winners of coveted literary prizes. Nor do all pulp magazines limit or restrict their pages to beginners. The work of Carl Sandburg, Lowell Thomas, Ahmed Abdullah, and others are to be found in the pulps along with that of less famous names. James Baum, official hunter and historian of the Field Museum Expedition, has appeared there, as has Alfred Bailey, director of the Chicago Academy of Sciences. So that this correction may have its constructive side, why discourage the reading of inexpensive magazines which are offering good fiction at small cost? Aside from the injustice of an unwarranted antagonism, it is worth recalling that inclusion on a forbidden list often booms a book beyond its intrinsic worth. If suggestion is acceptable, why not a high school reading board composed of sympathetic adults to discover good reading material, both fact and fiction, with a view to republication under a single cover with the permission of the several copyright owners? Afforded opportunity to absorb the best so simply, it may reasonably be hoped that the reader will learn to discriminate between the best and its antonym. William L. Chester, New York, December 1st, 1936. And again, this was published in December 3rd, 1936. Great letter. I mean, I really love this. It's really cool. Obviously, it was very emotional, very affected by the previous article sort of condemning the pulps. So good for him. So William L. Chester, he died from causes unknown to me in 1971, 1 year prior to getting Medicare. Oh, that's age 64 for you youngsters out there. Although in 1971, it may have been like, 62 or something to get Medicare. I don't know. It's 65 now. My sources for this feature were archive.org, Douglas A. Anderson's blog Lesser Known Writers, Galactic Central, and a big thanks to Lee Goldberg for the assist in locating this newspaper article for me. So, done with the two features. So next up is this episode's review. So it's review time. Today's review is a 1971, I don't know what to call it, honestly, mystery, suspense, horror novel titled Crawl Space. It was published in 1971 and authored by Herbert Lieberman. Now, Lieberman was an editor for Reader's Digest Book Club. He wrote 14 novels that border in that weird zone of like horror, suspense, mystery. And I found that a lot of books that are kind of in that zone are really, really good. His writing career lasted from 1967 through 2003. He passed away in 2023. Crawl Space was originally published by David McKay, I think in hardcover, but was later published multiple times by Pocket Books with like all kinds of cool covers, like seriously. The book sold well and was adapted into a made-for-television film that broadcast on CBS in 1972. And let me say, the 1970s scary flicks that were made for television are truly some of the creepiest films I've ever seen. Like Hollywood, just throw a small budget up there, forget all this CGI stuff, get back to basics like what the ABC movie of the week was. Movies that made you feel something, which is like what this book does. It makes you feel something. And by the way, that movie is available on YouTube, so you can watch it on YouTube. I haven't watched it yet, and I don't know if I'm going to, because sometimes I like the images that I've created in my mind of the characters and the story, and I just feel like the movie sort of just ruins that for me. So I don't know if I want to watch the movie or not, but I definitely like the book. So the book, elderly Albert Graves, he's got a heart condition. So he moves with his lovely wife Annie to this quiet farmhouse in New England, and everything is just going absolutely superb. He's retired. He's got a lot of time on his hands. The rose garden looks marvelous. But this guy comes to fill up their oil tanks. And he goes down in the basement, he fills up the oil tanks, and blah, blah, blah. He's kind of dirty, and he doesn't say a whole lot. But the Graves, they feel kind of bad for him, so they invite him to dinner. And he's scarfing down all this food like he hasn't eaten for a while, and they just feel bad for him. And so as he's leaving, he asks Albert if he could borrow a book, because Albert's got these great books. He's got a great book library. He's one of us. So he's got a great book library, and he's got like this treasured book that he's had for a long, long time. It means a lot to him. So of all the things, this guy that's just came to fill up their oil tanks borrows the book with a promise that he'll bring it back. But again, he talks very little. And by the way, this guy's name is Richard Atlee. So his name's Richard Atlee. And he shows back up again like the next day, I think, or maybe a day or two after. He shows back up. And he says that he's going to be working on the oil tank because there's something wrong with it. But what he does is he just hangs out down in the basement all day. And Albert realizes that nothing's actually being done down there. This guy is literally just in their basement hanging out for the day. So they invite him to dinner again because they feel bad. He's down there, in the smelly basement, and they invite him to dinner. Now things get super creepy, because the guy comes back unannounced and just goes into their basement. So the basement, let me describe the basement, because the basement has a lot to do with the story. So this basement is my childhood basement. I grew up in a 1920s two-story house that had a dirt basement. And so what you would do is you would go off the back porch, go around the side of the house. There's a wooden door there. You open it. You go into this corridor that's dirt. It's just a damp, smelly, dirty room. And then there's another door on the left. You go in there, another dirty room of dirt, dampness, and there's where the oil tank is. And then, big part of this book is, just like in my basement when I was a kid, right above maybe 4 feet off the dirt floor in that room, there's a little round hole. And maybe some of you have experienced this before, but that is the crawl space to get under the house. And that crawl space goes all the way under the kitchen and all the way up to the front porch. So you got a full basement you can walk around in. It's like 7 feet, tall. But then you get into this round hole. So you crawl up in the round hole, and then you can kind of crawl through all this dank, dirty, nasty spiderweb thing to work on plumbing and things like that. I've been down there with my dad. My dad used to go down there all the time to fix stuff, and I would have to crawl back there and hand him like batteries for a flashlight, or he didn't need a tool and he didn't want to back all the way out. It's super, super terrifying. Like it's terrifying. And then as you're in the house and you realize that down below is that dark basement dirty thing, it's like really freaks you out. So I totally got what the author was talking about when he was describing this basement, because it's exactly like my childhood. So what Richard's doing is he's going into that little door, and he goes over into the basement, and he crawls up into that round hole, and he's laying in the crawl space. And then the next morning, they hear him leave. He just opens up the door in the basement, and then he goes and runs out into the woods. No idea where he's going. So the Graves, they call the employer to find out what's going on with this guy. Well, the employer says that he's already quit. Like, he was only there for a couple days. He's already quit, probably left town, blah, blah, blah. Richard comes back the next night, and he keeps coming back. And they don't know what to do. And the way the basement is in this door there, or in this story, there is steps that go from the basement up into the house. It goes up into the up into like the library section of the house. I never had that one in my house, but they have it in this one. So what's really freaky is they're laying in bed one night, and they know that Richard is in the basement, but they hear the door open into the house. Richard comes into the house while they're sleeping, and he takes stuff. He takes some more books. He takes some like little trinkets from Albert's office, and he takes them back down into the crawl space and just stores them there. He's not even reading the books. He's just got to have something of theirs down there with him. And so Albert and his wife are like, what are we going to do with this guy? Like, he's in our house. And he just keeps coming up every night, hanging out in their house. But he's not bothering them. He's not doing anything that's nefarious. He's not, like, killing anyone. He's just in their house. Like, he's just there. And they can't get rid of him. And they're actually kind of scared to tell him to leave. And they sort of incorporate him into their lives. And I can't tell you any more about the book because things go absolutely crazy about halfway through the book. And it left me really kind of torn because I like Richard. And I felt like there is some stuff there that they'll talk about at the end of the book. But there's a history there with Richard that you kind of like wonder about throughout the book. Anyway, I'm spending a lot of time telling you about this book, but you got to read this book. I don't know if you've read it yet, but go out there, track down a copy, 1971, Crawl Space by Herbert Lieberman, and it's really good. I can't go into any more details about the book. I just want to get you the premise, and then, like I said, the second half of the book, I will say it involves some like vigilante stuff. There's a crooked sheriff, so there's got a crime fiction element to it. It's also got a mystery on whether Richard is, insane, who Richard is, what's his story. So there's a mystery to it. And the horror aspect is it's just creepy. I mean, this dude is creepy. So there's got a horror aspect to it, but great book. Excellent. Highly recommended. I'm also going to do a written review of this book and put it up in October for, scary season. All right. So that wraps up the main portion of our episode. Thanks so much for listening. You can follow us on Facebook, X. You can listen to the archives of episodes and reviews at paperbackwarrior.com. You can also check us out on YouTube, Spotify, Amazon Music, anywhere that's streaming podcast. So if you want to hop off now, I'll be back here maybe in about 3 to 4 weeks with another episode, maybe sooner. But in the meantime, if you want to stick around, I'm going to read a short story by Charles Beckman. So if you want to stick around and listen to that, you can. But otherwise, I will talk to some of you next time. And then for you, those of you that are sticking around, I am going to bring us today the story called How to Kill a Corpse by Charles Beckman Jr. This appeared in the June 1953 episode of Dime Detective. And I think this was probably close to the end of their run. I think this may be the second or third from the last issue of Dime Detective, I think. I'm not sure, but Charles Beckman in this particular magazine is listed as Beckman, Beckman Jr., and his real name and the name that he used mostly was his actual name of Beckman, Boeckman. If you're not familiar with Charles Beckman, I've got a couple reviews of his books, both as his name as well as his pseudonym that he also used called Alex Carter. And he used that name to write kind of like racy romance novels. But Charles Beckman was like a talented, very respected all-star when it came to playing the clarinet and saxophone. And he had great musical talent. He played jazz in New Orleans for like 70 years. But it wasn't his only occupation. Charles Beckman hung out with the Florida crime fiction writers. So he was part of that group with Harry Whittington and Day Keene and some of those others. But he went into writing. He sold his first short story in 1945. And he contributed regularly to Alfred Hitchcock's mystery magazine, Manhunt, and some of the pulps like Detective Tales, All-Story Detective, Dime Mystery. But in the 80s is when he kind of switched off and started doing the romance stuff, which those books are great. I've read a couple of them, and they're just fantastic. sort of crime fiction in a way. There's no graphic sex or anything like that. They're just good books with sort of domestic disputes and how things kind of spiral out of control. But he wrote, I think, 25 of those, and I think his wife Patty helped him write some of those as well. There's an excellent book by, I think it's Bold Venture Press, put it out, called Strictly Poison and Other Stories by Charles Beckman, which is great. If you want to dig into that, you can get it at boldventurepress.com or through Amazon, I think. But it's really good. I think his autobiography's out through Bold Venture Press as well, so I need to check that out myself. But anyway, let's talk about How to Kill a Corpse by Charles Beckman Jr. So I'm going to read this. This is our first go at reading a story. So let's give it a shot and see how it goes. If it works, great. But if not, then we'll scrap this idea. All right, so here we go. How to Kill a Corpse by Charles Beckman Jr. Over in Brownsville, on the Texas side of the river, they were having a gay time of it. You know, fiesta, charro days. Everyone wearing a 3 months growth of beard, big sombreros, gay vestidos. Everyone carrying a load. And over on the other side, in Matamoros, up in a filthy little hotel room, a beautiful girl was dying with a bullet in her brain. You'd think they'd feel it. They all knew her. Everyone in America knew her. You'd think a hush would settle over the crowd, and they'd stop their laughing and guitar playing, and parades and bullfights. But no, they kept right on, raising dust and sweating. It was winter. But down here in Brownsville, in the tropical Rio Grande Valley, it was warm. So everybody kept laughing and carrying on and sweating. If they'd known about Kit dying, their laughter would fade away. They'd get tears in their eyes, even the men, because everyone loved Kit. Everybody in America, in Mexico. Everyone who ever saw her. That's what they said about Kit. Everyone who ever saw her loved her. But they didn't know about Kit at 10 o'clock that morning. We were still looking for her. Russell Pierce, the private detective the studio had hired, funny little Max Liebswich, her director, me, Sam Jeffrey, we'd flown down here together during the night, and we were looking for her on both sides of the river. By 10 o'clock that morning, my bum ticker was slowing me down, and I had to leave the searching up to Max and Pierce. I'd walked through the crowd back to our hotel. They stared at me, the charros. They looked at the stooped man with the young old face, gray and lined, the wrinkled, slept-in suit, the deathly tired eyes, and they wondered what a creep like that was doing at charro days. You were supposed to be gay, happy, you know, felicidad. But I walked on, and I didn't look at them. I bumped shoulders blindly. I went up to my hotel room and took a pill and lay across the bed, waiting for the tight pain in my chest to go away. I stared up at the ceiling and listened to the yelling voices down in the street. I lay there a long time until finally the phone rang. I didn't want to pick it up. I had a feeling about what it was going to be, and I didn't want to hear it. I kept staring up at the ceiling, listening to the phone ring. And finally, I rolled over and picked it up. I held it to my ear there on the bed, and I stared up at the ceiling fan. I said, "Yeah?" It was Max. He was crying like a baby. "Sam," he choked. "Sam." So I kept staring up at the ceiling fan, and I knew what he was going to say. Max loved her too. Maybe more than you'd think. He wouldn't be crying like that unless it was bad. "Sam, we found her," he whispered. "We found her, Sam. Over here in Mexico. In Matamoros, Sam." His voice went up, and he kind of giggled. "In a rotten little adobe hotel with cockroaches on the floor and flies on the wall. In a place like that, we found her, Sam." His mouth sounded as if it had got filled with rags. He was trying hard to get a hold of himself. Poor, funny little Max with his roly-poly paunch, his pink, quivering jaws, and his baby blue eyes. Good, kind-hearted Max. He said, "You shouldn't excite yourself, Sam. You take a pill like the doctor gave you. You come over here, slow, to the Cantina Blanca, but slow, Sam, and not excited." Yeah, I shouldn't excite myself. They'd found Kit, but I shouldn't excite myself. I got off the bed like a guy who'd lived for 1,000,000 years with insomnia. I took another pill and I walked downstairs, and I went across the bridge into Mexico, where they'd found Kit at last. Like Max said, it was a dirty little place with whitewashed, fly-specked walls and a dirt floor. A combination desk clerk and bartender stared at me as I went upstairs. The smell of baking tortillas and corn shucks seemed soaked into the very walls. And then Kit's room upstairs where she'd played her most dramatic role, her own death scene. The fat Senora maid was rocking back and forth on a chair in a corner of the room, wailing hysterically to herself, making the sign of the cross over and over. Max was standing at the foot of the bed with his baby blue eyes wide and his cheeks wet, knotting up a white silk handkerchief in his fat, shaking fingers. Russell Pierce, the studio's detective, was prowling around the room. And there was Kit Langford, looking like a tired little girl who'd stretched out for a nap. Her left hand had fallen beside her cheek, and her fingers curled gently. She seemed to be smiling like a bewildered child, patiently waiting for someone to explain the strange thing that had happened to her. Her black hair had fallen loosely like a mist around her face, and the left side of it was matted and sticky from the round, red hole in her left temple. The room? It was a strange place for Kit Langford to die. Her suitcase was on the floor beside the bed, open. 3 of her dresses hung behind a greasy curtain in a corner of the room. There was an ugly brown, soap-stained table with a chipped enamel wash basin under a wavy mirror with a cracked corner. A little mahogany cross hung on the wall over the head of the bed. A plain, severe room, like a monastery. A nice twist for the publicity hacks. Kit Langford dies as she lived, plain and simple and idealistically. "We haven't notified anyone yet," Pierce said. "We've kept the maid in here. We've thought we'd wait for you. Now I have to let the Mexican authorities know and the sheriff in Brownsville." They stared at me, at Sam Jeffrey, at the person who, it was said, loved Kit Langford the most. Sam Jeffrey, the guy who made Kit Langford, took her from the bottom, molded her out of nothing with his bare hands into something even more than a great actress, into a symbol. They stared at me and wondered why I didn't bawl, why I didn't beat on the wall or grab Kit up in my arms. They wondered why I just stood there with my face stiff and set and my eyes dry. I whispered, "Gonzales Montian." Then I hurried downstairs and out of the place. They yelled after me, but I got away from them. I walked down the dusty streets of the old Mexican village, searching for him. I knew I'd find him. I knew if Kit were here, he'd be here too, not far away. The dust curled around my shoes, and the tight pain came back in my chest so that I had trouble breathing. I found Matian in a dark little cantina in a squalid part of town. The greasy, rat-faced little man was sitting at a table by himself, nursing a brandy. His face was twitching, and he had the color of a dirty lemon. When he looked up and saw me, he spilled the brandy all over himself, and he stood up, tipping his chair over. He drew the back of his hand across his slack lips. "Jeffrey, you..." I was smiling a little. I picked up a heavy beer bottle from the bar by its neck and smashed the end of it. Then I moved toward him, holding the ghastly weapon. He stared at it with his eyes bulging, his bloodless lips twitching. He knew he was looking at death. He backed away until a wall stopped him, and he kept staring with hypnotized eyes. He tried. Even a cornered rat will try. He reached under his coat and came out with a knife that slashed at my throat. I caught it, twisted it away. Then I jabbed with my other hand, the one with the jagged bottle. It wasn't pretty, but it had to be done. When they found me, I was standing over him, panting. My clothes were bloody and torn, and the pain in my chest had almost stopped my breathing. But Gonzales Munoz was dead, at my feet in a bloody little puddle. The Mexican officer caught my arms and pulled me away. Max Liebswich was standing there with his fat, good-natured face befuddled and unhappy, and Russell Pierce, the private detective, looking as if he hated his job. "I had to call the cops, Sam," he told me quietly. He shrugged. "Maybe you could explain away Gonzales Montian. You could say you killed him in self-defense. But," he said sadly, "not Kit. You found her first, this morning. You killed her, Sam, then went back to your hotel. I found this under her bed." He held up a set of my private keys. "You must have dropped them this morning. You found her and killed her in a jealous rage, Sam. She'd come down here to marry Montian, and you couldn't stand that. If we go to your hotel room, we'll find the gun, won't we, Sam? They stood looking at me. Max was blubbering. How could you, Sammy? That sweet, good girl. Everyone in America will hate you, Sam. Everyone in America will hate you. I thought about me and Kit, about the things they didn't know about Kit. Nobody knew. I wondered what they'd say if I told them the truth, that Kit Langford had really died in a tiny New York apartment one Christmas night 12 years ago. I had held her hand while she was dying, the real Kit Langford. It was pneumonia, and the doctor had told me she had only a few more hours, but which she wouldn't give up to it. She held onto my hand tightly, and her eyes burned with a light I've never seen before. I'm going to get over this, Sam, she whispered. You mustn't worry. I'll start the show just the way it's scheduled, and I'll be a great actress. I promise, Sam. She looked out the window, as if she could see her name up in lights over the little theater on Broadway. It was there, all right. Kit Langford, bright and shining through the falling snow, just as we'd always planned. But it would have to be taken down in the morning, because in the morning she'd be dead. The radio was playing Christmas carols softly, and the snow was drifting against the window pane, and Kit died that way, without a murmur, holding onto my hand. I walked through the snow later that night. Kit was still beside me. She'd always be. One of us couldn't die without part of the other dying too. And one of us couldn't stay alive without keeping a part of the other alive. I thought about Kit and about what a funny little girl she'd been and what a funny reason she'd had for wanting to act. Ask a girl why she wants to be on Broadway or go to Hollywood. Ask any of them. They'll tell you. Money, fame, excitement, success. With all of them, it was the same. But not with Kit. Maybe because of the way we grew up. You learn a lot about despair and hopelessness growing up in big city slums. You see kids with a spark of idealism and dreams that seem to come with you when you're born. And you see them old, even before they're out of their teens, with the spark stamped out, their eyes dead. Kit saw them, even more than I did. She saw them every day. And one night, she saw them when they came out of the movies. I think it would be wonderful to be an actress, Sam, she'd said, her eyes all warm and shiny. Did you see their faces? For a few hours, they weren't afraid or lonely or bitter. I think it would be wonderful to be an actress so you could make people forget about being afraid and remind them of their dreams. But you'd have to be a good actress, a sort of symbol, you know, the kind of person they really wanted to be and didn't quite manage. Yeah, all right. She was a crazy kid, I'll give you that. I thought so too. I wanted to be a big shot as much as Kit. But with me, it was money and decent living. I wanted to eat good food and dress in something other than secondhand clothes. And I wanted to drive a big car and yell at the dirty little kids playing in the streets, the way guys in big cars used to yell at me. I'm not throwing any roses at me, Sam Jeffrey. Maybe it was because Kit was a dreamer and I was materialistic. Maybe it was fate. Anyway, I got to the top first. After 5 years of starving, I hit Broadway with a play, then another. Kit was getting walk-on parts in plays occasionally and singing 6 nights a week in a basement joint in the village so she could eat. But she was good. I knew all she needed was a break. When I wrote my third play, there was a part in it for Kit. They loved her in it. And the next one, she got the lead and her name up in lights, just the way she'd always dreamed. But she didn't make it. She died of pneumonia a week before it opened on Christmas night, and I walked through the snow and wondered why they ever built this world in the first place. I guess I got drunk that night in a cold, numb sort of way. I made enough bars. I felt scared and alone with Kit gone, and I wanted people around me. And then I saw Kit. She wasn't dead at all. She was warm and alive and singing in her sweet, husky voice with a catch in it. I didn't know where I was or what time it was. Near dawn, I suppose. I saw her through a wavy haze, and she looked perfectly beautiful. I kind of sobbed in my throat, and I pushed through the smoke and the crowd, a hatless guy with snow melting in his hair, his soggy overcoat unbuttoned. I went up to her and tried to take her in my arms. I was crying like a kid. I knew you couldn't be dead, Kit. I knew they wouldn't let anyone like you be dead. I was stirring up a commotion. Somebody grabbed my arm and tried to drag me off the floor. Kit was staring at me as if she'd never seen me before. I didn't understand it at all. I couldn't see why they wouldn't let me hold Kit. why she looked at me that way, as if I were a stranger. And then I got it. It took a while to make them believe I wasn't just another drunk on the make. After I spilled enough words around and shoved a few $10 bills into the right hands, they let me go back to the girls' dressing room. Maybe I was a little crazy, but I wasn't drunk anymore. I kept thinking about what Kit had wanted more than anything in the world, and how she'd said with that strange light in her eyes, "I won't die, Sam. I'll be a great actress, just the way we planned. I promise, Sam." So I talked with this girl. I can't even remember her real name. Louise something. Because from that night onward, for the past 12 years, she has been Kit Langford. It was one of those things that happens once in a million. She was Kit's perfect double, an identical twin. Kit wasn't well known yet, and so I knew we could get away with it. I'd hush up Kit's death, and the play would go right on with this girl in Kit's part. Day and night I coached her. I molded her into the person Kit wanted to be. Not inside, really. You couldn't change her there, but outside for the world to see and love. Inside, she was as different from Kit as she was like her in appearance. I can't remember all the jams I got her out of, like the time I dragged her out of a guy's apartment 2 jumps ahead of the cops. The man's wife had taken poison because of Kit, this new Kit, and the police were investigating. That scared her. She tasted fame and money, and she liked it. She got down on her knees and begged for another chance. "This is the way it's going to be," I told her. "We're going to Hollywood. I have a part for you in a picture, but you're going to play a part off the screen too. No yachting parties, no drinking, no dope. While the rest of them are making headlines with their divorces, you'll be helping out some new charity. The sweet, sincere girl who didn't let success go to her head. That's you." I told her through my teeth. It was a struggle. Mess after mess I hushed up. Kit Langford became the most loved girl on the screen, and I worked 24 hours a day to keep up the illusion. Worked until the doctor told me my heart was going to stop ticking one day if I didn't take a complete rest. But I turned her into the real Kit on the surface. It hurt me to look at her. She was so much like my dead Kit. At times, even I forgot it was just a game we were playing. A serious, deadly game. The columnists said I would marry Kit soon. Then she began seeing this Gonzales Montian. She denied any romantic connection, but they were together a great deal, and she had a strained, tense look. Then, one night, 3 days ago, Kit Langford disappeared. She walked off the set one night and vanished. Gonzales Montian disappeared too. We traced her down here to Brownsville. That was the whole story. Well, almost the whole story. We were standing in the little dirt floor Matamoros cantina now, beside the body of Gonzales Montian. They were all looking at me in that unhappy way. Max Leibovich's blue eyes were incredulous, horror-stricken, and he kept mumbling to himself. How could anyone harm a hair on that sweet girl's head? Even the hard-boiled private detective Russell Pierce was looking at me as if I were disgusting. Everyone in America will hate you. That's what Max had said a moment before, and he was right. They'd hate the man who killed Kit Langford. I nodded slowly, wearily. I felt 1,000,000 years old. Yes, Pierce, I found her, early this morning, like you say. The gun is up in my hotel room. I killed her. So we walked out of the place, and that was the story that made the headlines in every newspaper in the country, from big New York dailies down to Oklahoma country weeklies. And, as Max prophesied, they hated me. But it was better that way, better for them to know the truth, because if they had known how Kit Langford really died, the symbol I had built her into would have become a mockery. Cynics would have pointed to her with a bitter smile and said, "See?" And the hopes and dreams she'd stirred would have died with her. Kit wasn't murdered. She committed suicide. She'd gotten herself into an ugly dope racket the year before. Through her, dope had been peddled to the very high school kids who went to see her pictures. Gonzales Montian had known about the deal. Later, he'd come to Hollywood for blackmail. He'd threatened to expose her whole ugly part in the racket unless she paid off. He bled her white. He'd come down here to Brownsville, then had wired her for some money. But she couldn't raise it. She'd come here to plead with him. But you don't make a bargain with a rat like Montian. She knew everything was folding up around her. Because of the way we'd built her personality, her career would be destroyed. She couldn't bear the thought of poverty and a prison term. so she killed herself. I found her that morning. I planted my keys in the room, took the gun with me, but I had to silence Matyan. He would have been questioned when they found Kit, and I knew the little rat would talk his head off. That's the real story of Kit Langford. And, like I say, it's better for them to hate Sam Jeffrey and love the memory of Kit Langford. Sam Jeffrey isn't anybody. My ticker isn't going to hold out long enough for them to bring me to trial, but that's the way I want it, because then I'll be with the real Kit Langford, the greatest actress who never lived. All right, so that's the end of that story, and I really liked it. Boy, that's a grim one, isn't it? Really somber tone to that whole story, but sometimes I like him dark and somber like that, and he's an excellent writer. I really, again, recommend that short story collection out by Bold Venture Press, Strictly Poison. It's great. But now the episode is really done. So thank you so much if you stuck around for the short story. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope I didn't bore you too much. I'm not very good at reading stories out loud. I read them to my wife in bed. We have this thing where I read a book to her in bed. We do like a chapter every night, and then we switch off, and then she reads a book to me. Like she picks out one that she likes, and she'll read it to me. So we do a little bit of reading that way. But this is the first time I read anything like this on the air, I guess, so to speak. So I hope you enjoyed it. I'll try to pick out something maybe a little bit more fantasy-oriented maybe, or maybe a little bit of horror or something like that. Maybe something pulpy horror for next time. I think I've got a couple ideas. But anyway, thank you so much for sticking around. Thanks so much for bearing with us as we had that huge gap between episodes. But hopefully we'll have a little steady pace here going forward. Thank you so much. Have a great day.